What's happening, everybody? It is Trey here. I'm joined today by my mom, Gina, and today on Reactions to the Classics, we're going to be taking a look at Queen's debut self-titled record. We're going to go through their discography in chronological order. We already did a Night at the Opera a few months back. Really enjoyed that, and decided to just tackle their whole catalog. And if this is your first time joining us, y'all, thanks for stopping by. Here at Reactions to the Classics, we take a look back at the most classic albums of all time and do a detailed track-by-track review. We listen to the record many times to get a good feel for it and do a bunch of research. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And if you'd like to link up with us more, you can check us out at our Facebook group as well as our Patreon if you'd like to support us and get some perks yourself. All that to say, we'll dive into some quick facts. This was released July of 1973. It was released on Electra Records in the US and then on EMI in the UK. And interestingly enough, this was recorded at two different studios. In December of 1971, it was recorded at the Langley Studios. They cut a good deal with the studio who wanted to test out some of their new equipment. Queen signed up for that and were able to cut 5 of their demos and lay those down. Then in 72, they were picked up by Trident Studios and they re-recorded the 5 demos that they cut at the Langley, and also were able to cut the rest of their album. But it was an interesting deal because they had to go in there in the middle of everybody else's studio recording that already had the time filled, so they didn't have a lot of time. They just had to steal their opportunity. And this lasted many months, but was finally wrapped up in November of 1972. But it took 8 more months for Trident Studios to try to find a record company to put it out. They finally reached a licensing deal with EMI, and at the time, Queen was already well on their way to writing their second album, Queen 2, so they were kind of discouraged that people were just now going to start hearing them.
The album was influenced by heavy metal and progressive rock. The lyrics came from a variety of topics such as folklore and religion. Lead singer Freddie Mercury composed 5 of the songs. Brian May composed 4, and drummer Roger Taylor composed and sang modern times rock and roll.
Our first track is Keep Yourself Alive. This is the first single that Queen ever released, and it didn't gain really any traction at all. Since then, though, it's become a fan favorite. Rolling Stone magazine actually ranked it as the 31st greatest guitar song of all time.
Yeah, and at the time that this was recorded, they didn't even have a bassist. It was just Taylor, May, and Mercury. So May originally wrote this as like an ironic tongue-in-cheek, but that kind of changed when Mercury sang it. This was one of my favorites on the album. I really liked it. I thought it started off strong with this song.
Yeah, me too. I thought it had that great, really fantastic guitar work throughout this entire record, and that's definitely on display here. It let the listener know, I can just imagine myself in 73. I don't know who this Queen band is, what they're all about. So I think this is a good show that, that they had on the hard rock, glam rock scene at that time, and this was a strong single, and as you said, a strong opener to start off the record. Our next track is Doing All Right. This was written by May as well as Tim Staffell. Him, May, and Roger Taylor were part of the band Smile, and Staffell left, and Mercury and John Deacon came on to obviously make up Queen. So all that to say, this was written in Staffell's vocal range and with his voice behind it, and whenever Mercury came in, he kind of imitated that, and that's why it sounds a little bit different than the rest of the record. I, for one, really enjoyed it. I thought it had a nice understated guitar, a more chilled out vibe than the harder rocker that we had in Keep Yourself Alive, and it was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one as well. I thought that it started out like slower and then kind of built to that more rock feel. And it actually featured May on piano.
Yeah, one of the few songs in their catalog that does that.
Yeah. All right, next up we have Great King Rat, and this was written by Freddie Mercury, and we saw some of those lengthy guitar solos in there and some of those sudden tempo changes.
Yeah, it definitely had a progressive rock feel to it. That's what I got from listening to it more so than any other track on this album. I think it delved into some innovation, experimentation, and those tempo shifts really did stick out to me. And I think May's best guitar work was probably on this track.
And what did you think of the lyrics?
Left some stuff up to interpretation, talking about the great Rat King, who's a dirty old man, and almost like people were rising up to kill him, maybe, or something along those lines.
To just kind of get rid of the evil, even if in turn it made them a sinner or evil, like it was worth it to get rid of him.
No, you're right. It's an interesting question to ponder in your mind. We finished side A off with My Fairy King. This is notable because it's the first track on the album that features Freddie's tremendous piano skills, and from here on out he takes most of the piano parts. It talks about the fantasy world of RHYE, which comes into play in the title of our closing track of the record, as well as in future songs that Queen puts out and produces. And this was had a very fantasy, epic type of feel to it. Again, top-notch musicianship on this, and again, another interesting topic that probably was just straight from Freddie's imagination.
Yes, and this one was actually written in studio. One thing to note on this one, it made mention of Mother Mercury, and they said that this is where Freddie kind of wanted to change his surname to Mercury.
Gave him a little inspiration, so
because he said it was reference to his own mother. I thought this one was okay. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was so-so for me.
Yeah, it I don't think reached the heights of the previous couple tracks. I think it is the weakest on the A side, but yeah, it's still a solid track.
All right, well that takes us to our next track, Liar, which is the first song on the B side. This was written by Mercury in 1970, and it was originally titled Lover.
It has a Hammond organ in there, one of the few Queen tracks to do so. This is essentially about a man who is a constant liar, and he has to end up turning to God to ask for forgiveness, and God's the only one that'll really, I guess, hear him.
Yeah, he's crying out throughout the song, Father, forgive me, hear me. I thought it was interesting. I didn't really know if it was like dual voices in his head. Like, is he himself, it's like the devil on his shoulder saying he's a liar, or other people saying that? I wasn't 100%.
Yeah, and that again shows, I think, even in these early stages, Mercury's songwriting ability to leave it up to the listener to kind of interpret it however they wanted to. This again had a prog feel to it, great bass and guitar work, though I don't think it reached the heights of Great King Rat. It was still one of my favorites on the B side. This was definitely a highlight track, and again showed that musicianship.
All right, next up we have The Night Comes Down, and this was one of the ones written by May. We see some of the trademark May themes with coming of age, the nostalgia, loss of childhood. I actually liked this one. It was probably, well, along with Liar, this and Liar were my favorites on the B side.
Yeah, for me, it had again a very heavy sound to it, but personally this was a more forgettable track on the record for me, where some of that other musicianship on the A side especially stood out. Here it just seemed to be more just kind of there for me, and didn't really do much to grab me in. Not a bad track by any means.
This one actually grew on me. The more I listened to it, the more I actually liked this song.
That takes us to the Roger Taylor written and sung track, Modern Times Rock and Roll. This deals with the themes of looking back to the rock and roll times of yesteryear, and how rock and roll's evolved and where it's at now, into that almost a theme song for the electric glam style that Queen helped make popular. For me, this vocal performance was not too great. No offense to the Roger Taylor fans out there. This was my least favorite track on the record by a wide margin. It's only a couple minutes long, though. It's nothing that is just a huge hideous blemish on the record, but it's definitely the weak point for me.
Yeah. And it was fine. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it, but I mean, it was forgettable.
Yeah, definitely. And then that'll take us to Son and Daughter, track 8, and this again is back to the Freddie vocal here. Another heavy song indicative of their influences of blues and heavy metal.
and it was played at the very first concert. This song was fine for me. Nothing super special about it, nothing that just really sticks out in my head.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It was, again, a track that was forgettable. Again, solid musicianship. I like the heavy sound to it, but I thought that there were other songs on this record that went for that heavier sound, that did a better job, and that stood out to me more. And then that takes us into Jesus, which is the last proper song on the record with the lyrics. And this is about Jesus. It tells
The partial story.
Yeah,
of Jesus.
of how he was born and some of the stuff that he did, healing lepers. And I appreciated this one. I'm a Christian myself, and I didn't expect Queen to pull this out.
Yeah. And I liked this song.
Me too.
This one was one of the better songs in my, especially on the B side.
Yeah, for sure. And that chorus had almost a choir gospel-like feel to it from Mercury's voice. It almost sounded like it was double-tracked or something along those lines. So I thought that was a nice touch. And that leads us into the final track, 7 Seas of RHYE, which is just an instrumental.
And that one is credited to Mercury, but May actually did contribute quite a bit
to that middle 8 portion. And they actually have a song on Queen 2 that is the proper version of the song. So they just give us a little sample to end out the record here. And that'll take us to our favorite tracks. For me, be Doing All Right. I like Great King Rat, as well as Keep Yourself Alive. What about you?
Yeah, mine was Keep Yourself Alive and Doing All Right. Those were my top 2. Starting out the album.
Yeah, exactly. No, that A side was definitely the stronger of the two, and
And Liar was up there. I would say that would have been my 3rd.
To our overall scores, for me, I thought this was a solid record. B side did dip towards the middle of the B side there, but we got it coming back up with Jesus, and we started off strong with Liar. So I'm going to beat a solid 7.5 out of 10 on here. I think that we have to remember that they recorded this under adverse circumstances, not having proper studio time, having to go in there and kind of rush a little bit. And so for that reason, I think it was a very good debut.
I actually am going to give it an 8. It did grow on me as I listened to it more and more. I found myself really liking it in a stronger way.
Yeah.
So I think an 8.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear Queen 2 and sheer Heart Attack, just to see how they continue to progress. We've already heard their magnum opus and A Night at the Opera, so seeing how they get there and follow from that will be fun to see. And let us know in the comments below what you think of Queen's debut record, your favorite tracks. Where would you rank it in their catalog? And thanks, Mom, for joining along with the Queen ride. We'll be sure to come back with the Queen 2 shortly. And until next time, y'all, thanks for watching. Happy listening, my friends, and we will see you next time.